The next principle, again, is something that we've been covering just now in the instant induction. Is the idea of overload. Remember, we want to bypass the critical factor, right? One of the things the critical factor cannot do is think of too many things at once, right? Again, we're gonna put a lot of concepts in a simple box. So, in one respect, the critical factor can be part of your attention span, and that can only handle 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information, right? If there's too much stuff going on, you cannot do that consciously. Driving a car is impossible to do whilst you're conscious. Did you know that? That does not necessarily mean you get drunk to drive a car. But it's all happening outside of your awareness. If you're in if from Europe, I'm from Europe, so you have a manual gear shift. You have the pedals that you have to maneuver. You have to look at the mirrors. You check where you are in relation to other cars, speed and speedometer. There's a lot of things going on. And if you don't think it's happening, just recall the first time you ever drove a car and the bucking bronco that resulted, right? That's an example of trying to do something consciously that should be occurring unconsciously. And that's what we're aiming to do. Get all these skills unconsciously. And in terms of overloading, this is a great method of bypassing the critical factor. Again, we'll come on to this conversationally, but how did we overload the person here in the induction? Anyone's? So we use shock and surprise. We use loss of balance, even though it's only partial, right? And possibly, depending on how well you set it up, a lot of instructions that need to be followed. Stand here, not just like this. Look at me, take a breath. Look here, focus clearly, sleep. There's a lot of instructions that have to be followed. Make sense? Versus, for example, stand over here. Look. Am I using overload at that point? Now, I can still be hypnotic, so the overload is not necessarily a universal principle, but it's a very good one that we will be using in conversations too. Make sense? So let's see what other things we did. Now let's look at the actual induction we did in terms of its mechanics, in terms of what's going on. Those of you who've seen the instant induction videos will already be familiar with this, but this is going to answer your question. When you did the instant induction, you'll notice that normal regular consciousness is here. Let's say that this area down here is unconsciousness. For want of a better word, we'll call it trance for now. When the person is overloaded or receives some kind of a shock or surprise, something that doesn't fit its normal pattern, it's got to do something with it. But because there's no pattern up here to know how to deal with it, the person will dip into trance for a while. Trance is basically, amongst other things, it's a vehicle that allows us to open up realities and test other ways of being, of seeing things, of doing things, and so on. Right? That's why we learn quicker in trance than out of it, because we're open to newness versus trying to fit into oldness. Does that make sense? So it spikes into trance trying to make sense of this all. Now, if nothing else occurs at that point, the person will naturally return back to regular consciousness. The whole thing might take maybe up to a second, 2 seconds at best, right? It's very rare that it goes beyond that, and it's usually less than that, right? So people will spike into a trance and then slowly emerge, which is exactly what it is that you said you saw, right? You saw your wife going down and then coming back and going, what's going on? In the absence of anything else, this is how 90% of instant inductions will go. Occasionally, someone will have a formulated idea of what hypnosis is about, either because they've already experienced it from other people, they've been preconditioned, or they've seen other people do it, so they've been prepared in other ways. And then they'll stay in trance all by themselves because it meets an internal expectation. Make sense? For most people, however, in order to keep them in trance, you will have to do something to prevent them from popping back out. What do you think that might be? A deepener, exactly. That's what deepeners are there for. Deepeners really are there to stabilize the trance experience, to prevent the emergent phenomenon. As a rule, trance is not stable. It goes in little cycles, not as clean as this. But if left alone, that cycle might cycle back up. Suggestions might allow that cycle to go further down or intensify the state. Do you see how that works? So when you said the words deeper, 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 who here noticed that it had more an effect on them as a subject than when someone didn't say that at all? Anyone? Yeah? And that's not particularly elaborate suggestions, is it? So, the rule of thumb is, with any kind of instant induction, with any kind of shock, surprise, overload, if you're using that principle, they will return back to the normal, regular state of being unless you do something to guide them deeper into the experience. Does that make sense? And that's the one thing that you missed out on, which is basically, you didn't deepen, right? And deepening is very simple. That's right, just go deeper, 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 enjoy it, and so on. You may need to put a little reason in there to keep them in there, because the other thing that will happen here is if they don't want to accept your suggestions because they don't feel safe, for example, up they come again. So does it kind of make sense in terms of the experiences you just had this morning, if nothing else? Right? Would that be fair? Go ahead.
Is there a way to put deepening on autopilot?
Is there a way to put deepening on autopilot? Yes, there is. We'd like to explore it. Well, we'll do that right in a moment. We'll come on to that literally after we finish this little segment here. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to stay awake but deepening on autopilot.
Oh, okay. Sure. She is. That's great. All right. Well, we'll actually come on to the whole process. We'll do something physical in a moment. The purpose of what we're doing right now, very simply, is I want you to recognize that even though you only spend, half an hour doing a couple of mechanical bits around hypnosis, do you recognize that there's a lot of content in terms of the principles that you are applying? Would that be fair to say? And can you actually see yourself, or when you review the performances you had here a moment ago, can you spot when you actually applied one of these principles? And importantly also, when you did not.
Yeah.
Right? And hence didn't maybe get quite the same kind of result as you did other people. Again, we need you to have those contrasts so you know which direction to head in. Because I'm not going to be there forever holding your hand saying, do it this way, do it that way. You're going to be able to develop your own experiences. And in a conversation, contrast, it's what keeps you on track. Make sense? Good. There is going to be one more principle that we'll throw in. Do you want to do that now? No, we'll do that. We'll do that in a minute.